public safety issue for the regulation of it on the roads, right? I mean, albeit at one point, I think the limit for intoxication, the per se limit for alcohol intoxication was, I think, 0.15 at one point.
That's what it was when I was young.
Right.
0.15.
So now...
Very young. By the time I was 16, it was already 0.08. They had lowered it twice.
That's right. That's right. And interestingly, currently, today, a 0.17 will get you a super drunk.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, with that being said, it's still highly regulated, and rightfully so. We don't want drunk people driving around intoxicated. I question sometimes whether, the ones that are kind of on the cusp of whether they're really impaired or driving, they just smell, and, whether that number impairs that particular person.
It's not that different, though.
I'm not recommending that anyone drive after drinking, but
they should have to prove some impairment.
Well, the way they prove impairment is by having to do field sobriety tests. Guess what?
You failed. You failed those tests sober. I
was going to say you fail those if you even haven't been drinking.
The only way to really make that fair is if they make you take your field sobriety test to get your driver's license, right? Then you can only really be expected to perform. Where's the control sample in all this, right? Where's the... Yeah. But it brings us to the other area, which is, I think, hyper-inflated in falsity and stuff. And I don't know, I'm, of course, a little hypersensitive. But, the issues with the Michigan State Forensic Science Division, #Crime Factory, have been festering again in our office. We've had a lot of fun discussing and analyzing, and me personally carrying, I think it's 9 or 10 boxes of, articles that have been collected over, from other cases and this case. And we had a chance to interact with the head of one of the departments. And, it's putting all the other interesting kind of nuances of just what I would describe as unscientific. It is. It's so clear. I mean, this is the one thing, and I think it's just it's the simple, most easy way to approach whatever my emotions are. Is there's such a terrible appearance of impropriety. By definition, the lab is working under in the off. It is the Michigan State Police's
the Division of the State Police
Forensic Science Division. One of the issues that came up, just generally speaking, is the that is a good point of discussion. I think for any, I don't know. Looks, Jeff, you hear what you think, but the lab takes a position that it's beholden, it's going to be responsive to its customers' demands and the responsibility of how a report will be made and offered, which they know is going to be used in evidence when they, draw blood or whatnot and have it analyzed.
Yeah.
That the decider of how those results are reported on the form is by the customer, who the Michigan State Police Forensic Science Division says is the police, law enforcement communities all throughout the state, and prosecutors. Now, I mean, that is a statement that seemingly does not... This is in writing. I mean, this is a statement that does not cross the mind of whoever's in charge of this. That seems to be an appearance of impropriety, especially when the lab, like all witnesses in a case, are supposed to be neutral, right? And if the lab is producing evidence at the request of the police officer, whatever their role is in this criminal justice system, is just a neutral witness. Now, are the police the clients of the prosecutor? And if the prosecutor is the client of the lab and the police are the client of the lab, where are the invoices? Are they getting tested and sending them and they're paying this? No, you know what it is? There's a budget that the legislature gives to the Michigan State Police, and everyone's paycheck in this game is paid from them.
Yeah.
So to say that we're beholden to our clients means that we are the state police and we're the lab and we're the prosecutors. We get a check from that same organization, probably that same budget, all the state operators. And what we're going to do is we're going to give ourselves these names to give the appearance that we have some division or now. I mean, it goes without saying that, and I think they would even agree that there's a duty, like all other professions, that most professions, that there's some like duty, some ethical, moral, fiduciary duty.
Well, they're supposed to be scientists.
To not being biased, especially in the field of science. Like, that's one thing we don't want to look at. Like most science conclusions have a methodology of avoiding bias, right, or ways to evaluate. Now, it's funny because that is a lot of what is behind the green curtain of what establishes them to be credible, all labs. But if on the front end, before we even get to whether their data is biased, whether there are controls to make sure that, vet that data is even facilitated, on the front end, as a matter of contractual obligation, they have clients that are the police. I mean, so I'm just saying, like, it's an inherent problem. It's an inherent problem that still exists and exists throughout the state. State in the country. I mean, it's the influence that the law enforcement community has on the lab that presents as a scientist, but is actually influenced by their clients. It's such a terrible scenario. Just it stinks. It resonates from the Max Lorenz case where same kind of influence was pushing. And I remember John Collins. Jeff, remember John Collins, the guy that was the lab director at Left and was interviewed, and he was like, this is how it was, and there's a lot of pressure from prosecutors and law enforcement. It makes a really toxic work environment for lab technicians, But I digress. I mean, other than to say that, I'm not pointing out right now that, in it is what it is. I may be mistaken in expecting a higher integrity when we're talking about forensic science.
No, you expect complete and utter objectivity, and you would expect that someone that's engaged in that, when they didn't see complete objectivity, that they would call it out. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, and in the private sector, this would never happen. Like, you calling a lab and saying, "Oh, I want to have this substance analyzed, and I don't want an uncertainty rate." Like, it's just not a thing. So the fact that they do this, I mean, it's not great. And what I would say is that it brings up the credibility of the Michigan State Police Crime Lab and the folks that work for it as experts in this field. Because if you're publishing this sort of report, it feels like it's lacking best practice that would take place within the industry.
Michael, didn't you get this fellow to admit that marijuana couldn't be a Schedule I drug?
Well, yes, Jeff, and we haven't really responded to the court with any pleadings based on that answer. But I do think that this is a reality, and it begs the question of, I mean, in order to convict someone of driving under the influence, There's a special statute, Section 8 of 257, 625, 257, 257, 625, 8 discusses marijuana, specifically marijuana. But the blood results don't say marijuana, it says THC.
Right.
Also, the jury instructions that for impairment for marijuana, if it's marijuana is chosen, require proof beyond a reasonable doubt that the substance was a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2, including cocaine. So there's a void of potential scientific proof that would be necessary. It's interesting also because I was I don't know I in the lab scandal case, with the way that forensic science was boasted about by one of the scientists or lab technicians was that a forensic scientist has two masters. One is the law and the other is science. So they'd identify the substance as what it is and then know if it was on the controlled substances and then list it, know what it was, find it, and then report it as such. So there's a combination of those two things that they have to know and understand. I did not get the impression that this toxicology department in general is focused on the controlled substance matter at all. In fact, they report out carboxy THC, which is not a controlled substance, which still is baffling to me,
Is it?
Well,
I mean...
Well, I'll tell you this. The fact that it's on there...
I mean, why it's there.
Well, it's always... I don't know if it's always... I don't know how long it to be... it may have always been on there. But right now...
Yeah,
there's multiple flaws with the way they're reporting this. I will tell you. I could tell you that the things that we learned this last week should make should make it so that there will never be a drive for a marijuana conviction for driving with the under influence of marijuana. Like no lab report should be admitted into evidence or could be used in a way that could be considered.
State police said it.
They would have to establish, but beyond that, I'm just saying that the methods that and the reporting and the lack of knowledge to be able to delineate the controlled substance factor is.
Fatal to their prosecution.
Yeah, it's going to be Jeff said fatal to the prosecution. I think that.
Yeah, but meanwhile, how long does this shit go on? I mean, we've talked about this over and over and over again on this show, and it's really easy. The police should have to prove two things: number one, that there was bad driving, and number two, that it was due to your consumption of marijuana. And outside of that, there shouldn't be a charge. This idea that you walk up to a vehicle, you may or may not smell marijuana, and you draw the blood of the driver, and it comes up with some level of THC in it, and all of a sudden they're guilty of OWI is ridiculous. Ridiculous.
And probably pretty difficult because hemp is now all over the place. And
Bingo.
You're able to, kind of indulge on a federal level, so it's all over the place, really. I mean, it's hard to get away from that, and how are you going to differentiate between one to the other? In court?
Anyway, so I don't want to get into too many of the details, but it still remains this bias and whatnot. I was going to Jamie, I think I sent you that thing, and I don't know that it's relevant. It might have some impact on, like, there you go. See those pictures and stuff. There was some interest that was going around for a little while about the Verity lab. Jamie, you still there?
Veritas. Is it Veritas or Verity?
Yes.
Are you still there? All right, so...
Yeah. The guy's name is Greg Michart or something like that.
Greg Michart is was also involved with he's the head of the helm of the
Michigan State Police Crime Lab
during the Max, and he's now the owner.
I think it's pronounced Michart.
Okay.
Michart.
Nevertheless, listen. So
He's making a joke. He's making a joke.
So I'm not trying to slander anybody, but
Well, definitely don't do that.
This is public. This is public.
It said Michard.
What I'm reading
Michard.
from right now was received in it was a published letter, and obtainable through FOIA. I'm not the first person to have it, and it's back in 2012. The law firm of Mike Nichols.
Oh, we know him.
Called Dr. Andre Stoltz, who's he works for Michigan State, and he determined that so what happened was they had I don't know if it was Judge Boyd, it may have been another judge, but nevertheless, the court threw out the results that were reported and based on a number of different things. In other words, they won a Dauber hearing, and what happened there is that Stoltz explained that the MSP had determined the margin of error for the testing of THC to be 8%. However, he said the MSP lab does not articulate this acceptable margin for error.
I thought you said it was 29.
This is 2012. Okay. I'm telling you, back in 2012.
It was better in 2012.
Right. And let me say, so this case gets dismissed for the reasons I'm about to explain to you. And what comes out of this is a request from within the lab to explain and defend what just happened. Okay,
WTF?
Yeah. So they got this ruling. Doesn't make them look good. Threatening out. They're meeting with the prosecutors out there now, trying to figure out what happened.
Yeah.
And they go on to explain this. So part of this 4-page letter that is written to explain and defend the lab, other than disagreeing with the expert and disagreeing with the judge, they explain this. But I wanted to get into this one certain area here because it deals with the Verity organization. First of all, Michard is in charge of this lab at the time. This letter that I'm reading to is to him.
Okay.
There's another person that's going to come into the story in a minute. She too was a player in the lab back then, and she's also a player in the Verity's organization, to wit, Michelle Glynn.
Oh.
She, in fact, was qualified as an expert.
An expert.
She's an owner of the business, and she was qualified as an expert who gave testimony.
How can that happen? Wasn't she was a party to the action, right?
I was not a lawyer for either party, but I would have objected to that because her testimony is what drove their defense. Their defense was that their criticism of them, listen to it now, not having the data to substantiate the results. Remember, Jamie, am I wrong about that? That was the issue that was being complained about amongst things, that the recall was that when they were called to prove the data of the material had passed, they could not produce it. Am I right about that?
Yep, they were keeping records of like the temperatures at which they were conducting these tests and some other important things that
it was hot.
Would make a difference.
So I mentioned that because those criticisms were responded to by Michelle Glynn, who dismissed.
So he said, "You can trust me. I'm an expert. I'm not the defendant.
Yes,
I'm an
and
expert.
I'm going to keep some secrets."
Right.
She dismissed those allegations as insignificant and accused.
Well, I'm sure she did.
And accused the MRA of not being qualified to justify the recall as they did.
No wonder Andrew Brisboe doesn't seem to care for them.
Here you go. Dr. Stoltz explained that the MSP has determined the margin of error for the. Now, this is about THC in the blood for criminal cases. For testing THC to be 8%. However, he stated that the MSP lab does not articulate this acceptable margin for error in terms of nanograms per milliliter. Further, 3 out of 4 samples tests were outside the acceptable margins of error. Now, the person writing this is responding to his conclusion. She's cutting and pasting into this the reasons for why they got to the result of why the court got the result, and she's meeting point by point.
Yeah.
This is not an accurate representation of measurement uncertainty, which is simply statistical calculations based on historical control data and all possible variables and measurements contained in the procedures for quantitative analysis of THC in the blood. At the time that the THC analysis in this case was performed and reported, there was an uncertainty declaration printed on our request for THC results. It stated, uncertainty of measurement is approximately 7.98% and a 99.7 confidence level. Now, This is important because the current lab reports do not have a uncertainty of measurement statement.
Yes.
We know what it is.
We know what it is.
I know that it's not 7.98, and I know what it is. Now, let me go on to tell you this. Yeah. This measurement uncertainty was prepared. So understand, she's saying, look, this is what we put on a report. We report a THC, nanograms, and a 7.98 at 99.7. The measurement uncertainty was prepared and added to our reports by Michelle Glynn.
Oh.
When I began reviewing our historical data for THC, I was unable to find the records of how these calculations were made by Dr. Glynn. Huh. She might be a serial record loser.
I hope not. I hope not.
After consulting with a laboratory auditor and doing some research on measurement uncertainty calculations, I recalculated the measurement uncertainty for THC in blood in our laboratory and found it to be
ding, ding, ding.
Not 7.98%, but instead 35%.
Ah, there it is. There it is.
This result, as well as the calculations that led to it, are detailed in our protocol measurements of uncertainty. So,
it's a pretty big swing.
But I just point out to you that these are facts. This is part of the public disclosure that takes place when inquired about. This is a letter that was written to defend the quality of the lab, because I think this thing goes on to say that it doesn't matter about the measurement uncertainty. Either way, you put this measurement uncertainty on it, run the numbers off that, or the one that it really is, there's still the presence of it.
Right.
Right, so that's like, but what I'm suggesting to you is that this is blatantly non-scientific. You can't be that far off. She's running the show and reporting this on every single report. How long did this go on for? And is it not exculpatory to have a number of 31%?
Oh, it's enormous.
Well, like, that's something to play with. You know what I mean? Something to play with in front of a jury. But to say 7, it's, you know. Furthermore, I can't help but to notice that number and its confidence level was a representation made by Dr. Michelle Glynn. Her data could not be found, and there's a pattern of some kind here. What do you think, Jim?
I don't know, and I don't want to slander anybody.
Is that slander? I'm reading.
But I would say that most folks that consider themselves scientists are fairly diligent about keeping records of things, especially when they're involved in potentially locking someone up in a steel cage. So it's a problem. What's the certainty rate out of Veritas? Does anybody know? It'd be interesting to understand what their...
Well, understand that the recall that came about was that they were not able to produce the data.
No, I get it.
And she didn't do that here.
But the red flag, though, was there would be material sent to them that had failed at another lab.
Yeah.
And you have 2 shots at it. And without any remediation or anything, they would get the second test and they would pass very quickly. And that was happening a lot. And then their passing rate was very high, and so that was a red flag, and that's what started the investigation.
They couldn't establish the length of time that they let the material, grow on the platelet to see if it had harvested to the level of, had grown
to let it linger.
Well, they didn't have the data. And my point is
like
that
the Cranberry song.
As scientific as it. I mean, I don't. I mean, listen. I'm not slandering anyone. This is the lab. The lab, when defending itself, did what? It gave the excuse that she's no longer here. She's the one who's in charge of it. Turns out it was wrong. I recalculated, and it was different.
Yeah.
I just, in the world of the things that are going on right now, I thought that was somewhat relevant. I would almost think that would have been something that would have needed to be disclosed to the MRA, you'd think, right? Especially at the beginning when they snabbed that medical license and...
I don't know.
All right. We're going too far, you think?
No, but we got to take a break.
I'm a little upset with the lack of objectivity in labs.
Yeah. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But, you know.
I want to hear from Jamie. I did a lot of that for Jamie. We can't take a break until we hear from Jamie on that. Seriously. Jamie, that's from the thing I said, what do you think about any of that? Come on.
Well, they're full of shit. They keep on demonstrating how they'll skew science in order to, get a desired outcome. They've been exposed.
Oh.
And what makes us think that they're not doing that in this new world?
On that note.
Well, listen. I'm pointing out. It's not that often that like right before us, you have the state major, major controversy for with the lab and interfighting with the labs and fighting with the MRA and.
Huh?
Are they gonna file a complaint against them? What's gonna happen? And they win their case, which was arguably chutzpah comes to mind. Where they sued.
They didn't win.
Well, they didn't lose. They took on the state.
State split the baby.
But the idea that they went at him and said you can't do this to us because whatever, and fine. And now there may be a complaint filed or not, but with all that being said, one of the critical moments of it was these allegations of the missing data that Michelle Glynn was responsible for and explained away, and then just as a matter of course, some public documents have been coming to and I see the Michigan State lab themselves calling her out on the exact same things that the MRA was.
Not good.
It's just the irony. Like it wasn't like I was even out looking for it. You know what I mean?
They all demonstrated they're willing to skate how things are supposed to be done.
Dan, the sound is bad.
I see Dan's coming in from his Zoom.
Dan, dangerous Dan.
Dangerous Dan. What do you have going on over there on location?
Hold on. Look
Thanks for sticking around, everybody. You guys ready for the second stat?
There we go. Dangerous Dan.
Good to see you.
My little blondie hair.
Ooh, throwback.
What I find is crazy and I'm feeling high. Love is so confusing, there's no reason. People feel losing, you judge, no good, you feeling like you do.
That's good.
Ooh, whoa. Ooh, whoa. Ooh, whoa. Ooh, whoa.
Once I lived as a cat, stranger down at a hard life. Sitting little bit of supply, much distress, lost on time. Lost inside, store blues, and I cannot hide. I'm one to use it, please don't push me aside. We could have made it cruising, yeah. La la la, la la la, la 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 la. La 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 la. Alright, I lost your bluish light. Ooh, whoa. Ooh, whoa. Ooh, whoa. Ooh, whoa. Oh, I love the music. Something out to be very yes. Seem like the right thing on to find. Let's just try ourselves out of mind. Ooh, whoa. Ooh, whoa. Ooh, whoa. Ooh, whoa. Thank you very much. You guys are a wonderful audience. Wonderful audience. Thank you very much. Spend my time with you. Who's it? You can see me standing in the spotlight. You can make a man play all night. You can hear me singing on the radio. I can hear you screaming from the front row. I can see you laughing just like old times. I can see you smoking out on the blanket or a picnic in the pines. I can see you looking I hope to pass. No matter the cost, the price, the pain, if we make it break the cost. There's no day too long, no you too high. We'll be 10 miles long and 10 miles wide. Oceans 50 miles deep, Philippines and sharks and coral reefs. Nothing now that I'd rather do. Spend my time with you. You can see us flying up way up in first class. You can tell all the no good haters I forgive you for the past. You can see us rolling with a lamb on the road, with a big fat joint, a cold Bud Light, crying up some Rolling Stones. There's no day too long, no you too high. We'll be 10 miles long and 10 miles wide. Oceans 50 fathoms deep, Philippines and sharks and coral reefs. Nothing that I'd rather do. Spend my time with you. wide. Oceans 50 fathoms deep, Philippines and sharks and coral reefs. Nothing now that I'd rather do. Spend my time with you. Oh, spend my time with you. Oh, oh. Here we go. I wrote that song, that's called Spend My Time With You. There's no place I'd rather be on a cold Thursday night. With all you wonderful people. So there's supposed to be a $10 cover charge tonight to get in this place, but you know what? I talked to the manager, and I said, because all of you wonderful people came out tonight, I said, you know what? Tonight, we're going to let them in for free. Well, my buddy's going to come around with a tip jar if you want to put a little money in it for us. Thank you very much. I don't like to ask. Just glad to be somewhere.
I know for you. I'll take her out.
Oh, yeah.
Thank
Been with fun that messed around, I'm having fun, don't put me down. I'll never let you sweep me off my feet. I won't let you in again, these messages I try to send the information to the point. Burning bridges, so I broke away from Sunday morning. I turned down to love onto this street. Been with fun that messed around, I'm having fun, don't put me down. I'll never let you sweep me off my feet. Oh, this time, baby, I'll be forever. This time, baby, I'll be oh, I don't let you turn around and come down one more strong to walk away from something where it's good. You can do your dirty work from outside when you are hurt. There's certain things that you cannot do. Tick, 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 just watching like you don't need stuff. Oh, baby, the fight is running out. Woo! I won't let you turn around and tell me how I'm not sure about. All you do is fill me up with doubt. Oh, come baby, I'll be forever. This time, baby, I'll be forever. All the time, baby, I'll be forever. This time, baby, I'll be forever. Messed around, I'm having fun, don't put me down. I'll never let to sweep me off my feet. Do your dirty words out to play. Do I've heard something should be left unsaid. Oh, tick, 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 9 o'clock, go loud to show for me to stop, oh, baby. Time is running out. Oh, that sweet little baby, that good fat, yeah, don't I love you today, I swear. Stay with me now. It's time. This time I'll be That was some wonderful dancing, by the way. Oh, yeah.
We're back now. Okay.
We're falling apart. Falling apart at the seams.
Live music, Planet Green Trees, bringing it from
Dee's iPhone.
Dee's iPhone was killing it.
Dangerous Dan.
That was the name of that band, Tommy, is whom? Austin Scott. Austin Scott is the name of that band, and they were one of the performers at Cannajam, which is in the works. Cannajam 2 coming soon to a Ypsilanti Riverside Park near you. October 8th, I think, is the selected day, although we've been contemplating expansion.
Maybe a little something different.
Like an entire month, maybe.
Can a month. Yeah. Would it be September or October? It's get kind of cold at the end of October.
That's true.
Got to get the hand warmers and the fire pits.
Right. But Dan said it'll be warm again this year, so.
All right, 9:45. We were talking about the lab and stuff, and I was ranting and river. And we could move on from that. I'm curious I just want to point out, Jeff, move forward. I saw you had like a wool hat on because it was like 40 degrees in Texas for a couple seconds, and I thought it was yeah. Look at him. Like he's really he's cold. That's the look of cold right there. Like I'm in Texas, and okay, I know you got you spent enough winters in Michigan to know how to handle it.
I do. I'm dripping the faucets. You know, Michael, one of the things that keeps it stuck in my mind with this lab, what it's doing in this lawsuit, is they're calibrating their instruments, but they're not testing for the null hypothesis, and they're not testing for the fact that there's, one of their tests has 0 THC in it, right? They run 100 tests. They know that it all has 2.5% THC, or the blood, or whatever they do it, but they don't ever test the false positive. They don't test for false positive, and that's not science. That's where I get hung up with this.
I mean,
like even when they're training dogs, you know, they don't always have marijuana in the car, right? They also test to see how many times that the dog alerts when there is in fact no drugs, right? Same here. They need to test the number of times that that there is a false positive, and they don't do that. They're not doing science. That's where they're covering up this whole thing. Anyway, that's what's bothering me.
The other thing is that they don't do any blind studies. Everyone that's testing a sample in their control samples is testing a known sample.
Right. And there are no negatives. There are no nulls. It's not science.
It's a little distressing, I think.
A little.
It's not science. I mean, it's a problem.
It should scare the shit out of people.
I've calmed down since the last segment. I was a little
And it's not just
emotional.
in Michigan. It's this type of shit is happening in other states, and how does this happen?
How about most, if not all, of the cases that you hear where there's a Innocence Project exonerating someone from DNA, or even, integrity, conviction integrity unit setting, case aside.
Integrity.
You're going to find at the core of the invalid or unconstitutional conviction will be, most certainly, some junk science.
Mm-hmm.
Legendary expert witnesses were used to testify for their clients. The government's witnesses, experts in bite mark testimony, hair follicle testimony, shoe print testimony, 100% accuracy type of testimony, which was all flawed. It's not good. It's not good. I can't help to. I don't know if we were talking about this, but the phenomena would not exist if the system was working as it's supposed to. I think one of the biggest misnomers is that the prosecutors are. I guess it's a discretionary call, right? Because you're an elected official and you must serve to the people, the county prosecutors. But and nobody really knows who's telling the truth, right? And one thing you don't want to be perceived as if you're a prosecutor is not being tough on crime. So when the police go out and take a statement for something, they're making the decision essentially who we're going to charge, assault and battery or domestic or other stuff, or who's bringing the cases to them. It's going to be the police. They do the investigation. They bring the warrant request. Yeah. And there's a process of a checks and balance. To some degree, they're all in the executive branch here we're talking about. But there's checks and balance where you got a lawyer sits down, reviews the reports, and really thresholds. Is there enough evidence here to not just issue charges, but a likelihood we'll be able to get a conviction at trial?
Right. And
for what crimes? But this has become a rubber stamp process, unfortunately. I see a lot of times. It's very rare that... it's very rare, like if you see a... you make a little break in a prosecutor's case where it's significant that they're just going to, recognize it. It'll be ignored and fought through and defended if you've, offset the integrity of the evidence or whatnot. But it's not supposed to be that way. If you can't make the case, then, concede. It's not personal.
Yeah.
It's broken. I mean, it makes sense, really. It makes sense when you understand the... I don't know if it's a lack of true science that builds the science policy and the things that we're working on, or just the leadership is not really trying to operate as a true scientific lab, but instead as a client.
That's exactly what it is. I mean,
but they're
on the same team.
It makes a lot more sense. But here you go. It makes a lot more sense that something like that would happen when you understand that the district courts and the court system itself, need those kind of things.
Yeah.
Right? They need a little trick back so they can keep turning these cases over. It's interesting. One of the rules of criminal procedure in Michigan is that at a preliminary exam, this happens quite a bit, the prosecutor gives notice to the court in the defense attorney or the defendant that they are not going to be calling the lab analyst at the preliminary exam, and they're just going to proceed with the document, which would normally be hearsay, and this is allowed by an exception to the rule at the exam, the point where the case is going to either be bound over or not.
Yep.
So the questions to the integrity of that preliminary exam, the report at that time, most of the time get admitted without, under an exception to what is known as hearsay. It's not even a traditional. It's not even a. I mean, it's written into the rules, criminal rules, but it's a way for them to get in without having to call the expert to explain it away, and the court will accept it as, well, counsel, it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just probable cause, but the combination of those two things and the way that it is, I don't know. We've beaten the horse. This is almost, it's kind of like, I used to make fun. I started making jokes like 2016, 17. Like, we got to stop talking about shooting. I mean, it's just too easy. It's not creative. It's like telling the same joke over and over and over. It's just like there's so much material there. We got to challenge ourselves here and whatnot. So, I mean,
it's the same as it was with Shooty. It's people are going to jail over this shit, and it's ridiculous. And you think back to when we were kids, and if you got pulled over and the police, found marijuana in the car, if it was a small amount, they probably weren't going to do anything. Certainly, if they smelled marijuana in the car and then searched it and didn't find anything, they were just going to let you go. And those days are so far gone. But there was never any uproar about, operating while under the influence of drug crime. Back when I was growing up, and the fact that it just seems to have appeared when all the evidence says that it's really not as big a deal as people think it is.
Well, the amount of kids that age that started getting dragged into the criminal justice system was probably around, say, like in the 90s, early mid-90s, and they need more customers to bring into the system.
Yeah. And now marijuana is legal in Michigan, so they got to figure out how do we supplement that, and this is how. And they still want to search your car, and correct me if I'm wrong, but cop pulls you over, smells weed in the car, smells burning marijuana in the car, they're going to say that they suspect that you're under the influence, and at that point they're going to search the car.
I wanted to bring this up. Maybe Steve will hear it and come in. There's been virtually, we've the last year or so has been in, tortures for a lot of different reasons. We've seen a lot of different human suffering and civil unrest, and a lot of antagonism between people and hatred, lack of unity. And, of course, there's a certain bias in the conversations I have about the police being at the center of some of this and some of the activities and what needs to be done and what reform is going to come out of this. Now, Michigan has been pretty – they've been, like I've practiced law 30 years. They, in the first 20, they've maybe amended the expungement statute once. And then the next 10, it's been 2 or 3 times. And this last go-around has been really quite remarkable. Some other things have happened that have changed the dynamics, but we did have a lot of sweeping reform, bail, cash bail, writing tickets. There was a report again about what needed to be fixed, and there were some attempts by the legislature. Now, there's documents and data to suggest that these things need to be done. It's just not necessary. It's ruining people's lives. States taking steps to try to correct those things. But when you look back at what has happened, if anything, about the role that police play in our society, the role that they play with initiating cases and where those occur from, not putting the police officer specifically on the spot, but the policies and the intentions of the police department of where and how they do their business. And I remember specifically, I talked about this a lot, that when we were debating and discussing the legalization of marijuana, one of the sheriffs from somewhere near East Lansing came out and was against it like many others and said, our sheriff's department does 5 or 6 home health, mental health calls per day. Mm-hmm. And if you legalize marijuana, they're just going to become more and more. And my response is, that's not a reason not to legalize marijuana. That's
it's also not a thing.
It's a reason to ask, why are the sheriffs doing 5 or 6 mental health calls a day? That's not a job for the sheriffs. No. Which brings me to, like, what if everything's being done? I mean, there was a mantra of defund the police. That's not going to happen. I mean, I can tell you, my answer is you got to remove qualified immunity for police officers or make a lower bar of some kind. And I think that, but nevertheless, Jeff Frazier and I were talking the other day. He's in Austin, Texas. He was referencing a good buddy of his who's one of the renowned forward thinkers in the reform movement of the criminal justice system. And Jeff, Steve was opposed to this, but Jeff said, I think in Austin, correct me if I'm wrong, or one of those says the concept and idea is that they take 911 away from the police. In other words, if you make a 911 call, it may be we're having, like someone's having a mental health breakdown. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Now, whether they're, there's different layers and levels to this of who would be the appropriate. There may not be the right people in place right now.
All right.
But we know that some situations may not be best met with armed response, where the immediate person is trained more from their own personal safety justification, kind of shooting to kill you, versus someone that may be trained in the issue a little better.
Right.
Now, I say that, that this may be a different story. I say this for Steve's defense, because he thinks police officers should be making home calls. That's where but there's a lot of judgment. There's personal, they have to have discretion. It can't be automatic. But I think we were in the frame of a more community-based policing, not like we are now but if it, that might be a little bit different too. But Jeff, I thought that was interesting. Jeff, if you want to comment on that, or Amanda or Jamie, do you hear what I'm saying? Like, the principle here is that, think of all the incidents, you want to call the police, right? I know you want to call 911 because you need some help by the government in some capacity. You're paying taxes, they have resources, fire, ambulance, police, garbage, whatever.
I guess in some areas, I guess, would be a better experience than others, I guess. But what it comes down to is that there's just not enough resource for people that have the mental illness. I know in some counties they have like a crisis team that you can call in lieu of having to call the police. But again, it's probably something that is just area specific. And I don't know all of the details on, what they would do, but I do know that they have more of a social worker type of, setting versus armed law enforcement. But it's crappy, because think about it, if, you do have to have a police officer come over and for whatever mental health crisis you're having, and the person that's having the crisis certainly doesn't want to see the police, like that they're getting in trouble for something. I don't know. I think there's a better solution, especially since a lot of these things, I don't know how it all works. I suppose it goes into a general fund for all of the revenue that they're generating from the cannabis sales and things like that. It seems like those are the services and programs that could be invested in or expanded upon with the extra dollars floating.
There's not a direct answer to mental health issues, number one. Number two, like, they haven't figured it out in each individual situation is probably specific. The government is divested themselves out of, government treatment centers. They closed down all the mental health hospitals. And there's a correlation probably that there is no other sources really to, in the front end of dealing with this. There's lack of funding, and all you have left is the police to answer those calls. They may not be properly trained in that. The reality of this working differently is doesn't happen by virtue of just changing. I think you need to have certain things in place. Obviously, Jeff, like you need to have some other service to call in lieu of the police. You got to have a selection from a menu of some kind. You have the person that's trained well enough to intake the information in a very short period of time, be qualified enough to make a decisive call, and then pick the selection, because it may be dangerous, it may not be dangerous. But the question is, does that selection there jeopardize the safety if there is in fact some immediate harm or immediate threat? But the better question is, statistically, how many police calls? I guess it depends where, right? I mean, bigger cities, different. I don't know. It's probably not consistent. I don't know, Jeff. What do you think about that? But what's the number of calls to the police that require a armed response, or to 911 that require an armed response?
Well, to kind of work backwards from that, something like 4% of all calls result in the observance of a crime or arrest. 4 out of 100.
Okay.
In Texas. So.
Well, what about the country of the United States? I mean, I'm not talking about the country of Texas. I mean, this is different. No, okay. I mean, first of all, everywhere I go, every court I've been in, every prosecutor I talk to has confirmed over and over again that they are busier than ever. Crime is up. It's on the rise. They can't explain it. One jurisdiction that told me, like, we're not that big of a town. And we used to have maybe 1 homicide, 2 homicides every 10 years. We have 10 currently pending. I mean, I understand in Washington County, there's a ton of, different types of cases, a lot of CSCs popping up all over the place. I don't know what the explanation is.
Not good.
Could be
people are losing their damn minds.
Someone's in the water, they're losing their minds.
Yeah.
What do you
Cooped up for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, I don't think that. I think most of the business of criminal cases in some situations, most of it, because there's a ton of traffic, misdemeanor stuff that is local. You don't even, may not even get it. It's a lot of, which is and a lot of the court, like even in the family courts, neglect courts, and whatnot, it's all driven by, social issues, not necessarily crime issues. It's education, economics, mental health, food, shelter.
Yeah.
What would be super awesome is if you would be able to just, over the course of the day, just have, like you said, Michael, some place where somebody could call and somebody on the other side was trained in different, like a dispatch or some, you have CPR training or something like that. Maybe you have a specific line that you dial for, crisis, mental health crisis that doesn't need law enforcement. Who knows?
Right.
I don't know. But
you're right. You need to take the dispatch away from the police, but you also, like you say, want to have the resources to refer these people. I'm having a heart attack. Do I need a cop at my house? I'll just have another heart attack. What the fuck?
Right, exactly.
But you're right in that you have to have other resources to divert them to: mental health services, child services, whatever it happens to be. There's a wreck, whatever it is. There's a fairly good argument that traffic cops have no need to be armed. What Michael says is right. It's like, does every single call to 911 provoke an armed response? And the answer is, it does, but it shouldn't. And so taking 911 dispatch away from the police is what they did in Austin. It was quite a move.
We don't community police. It's fair. We've got a militarized police in a lot of jurisdictions.
And
become the police.
That's the problem.
It is.
It's not that they have firearms.
But here's the problem. Because of that, the idea and the trust of calling the police is only a limited group of people.
Yeah.
Like I think, I don't know what that number is. There's some cities that they're okay with doing that. It doesn't evolve into, but a lot of people are distrustful of the police and won't call.
Right.
Which is terrible if they need help. You know what I mean? And they need to get through to some other type of service that they have to go through the police, or know that if they're calling for their service, there's going to be a police officer at the door.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
You don't want to call the police if you don't have to. Why? I mean,
deal with them.
There's a lot that goes along with. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
and then who knows? Who knows? It could make the situation worse, because you see those folks there, and somebody's already on the edge. I mean, what are you going to do? Toss them over? That's what it feels like. No good answer, really. And I mean, the whole thing needs to be revamped.
Well, you need a better toolkit. To a man with a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. As long as we're calling the police for every problem, every solution looks like a guy with a gun turning up at your house.
Can't give them a screwdriver, because that just results in them trying to screw everybody. Yeah. Instead of just hammering them.
Yeah.
It's got to be like a shovel. No, it's got to be like, what was it? Certainly not like a nail gun. Can't be that. Let's see. We got Jeff. Come on, what tool is in the toolbox are we going to use? A thread? Like a thread.
Should be a level.
Ratchet.
No, that's still metally and painful. We got to give them like. Where's my toolbox? Let me look at my toolbox.
I don't know, but I don't. The first and foremost, I think we need to recognize that there's a bunch of these calls that the police are going out on that they really have no business out on, and that the police are not the right tool for the job. And if someone's having a mental health crisis, like Amanda said, I mean, they don't need law enforcement showing up. They need someone that's trained in dealing with mental health crisis. And there's a license for that, and that's who they need to show up.
And that's why people go through years and years and years of schooling,
right,
to be able to communicate effectively with folks that have mental conditions.
But look what the other option is. That would be part of the government services. It would be something like a social worker,
right, which is also not great.
Who's going to call CPS,
right?
You know what I mean? So I mean,
yeah, good point. Good point.
And again, that'd be another reason why even you shouldn't call, unless there's something serious.
It's unfortunate, because these people, especially those that don't have access to health care, are now forced to just basically ignore the problem and hope it will go away, because they sure as hell aren't calling the police.
No, they're dousing themselves with alcohol and drugs,
right,
to self-medicate. And then it turns into the scenario, Mike, they're cranking them through the court system, tossing them in jail, spitting them out onto the streets. They have they're drinking, they're doing drugs, whatever. It's a vicious, terrible cycle.
I could foresee this. If you analyze the amount of revenue that's generated to the state at the local level, or to the cities at the local level, from those police encounters, whatever the cost of the state, the housing of them in jail, the court cost, the payment to keep the business open. If you took those dollars and invested into like a, community center of some kind that was filled with these people, independent of the police, not monitored by the police,
right,
that could serve as a place to go to, if that's a thing still, but certainly available for phone calls. And that community center, it's got to be private. It can't be, I don't think it could be government run. I think you got to almost have, or quasi in some way. But you know what I mean? Like it's.
But that's what needs to happen.
Because
we don't.
It's such disconnect there. You almost got to build the base. You got to build the structure and the.
You've got to give access to resources to people.
I mean, because really, the idea of some other person coming out and healing is also problematic. Like, every person that's going to be in that position, however well-educated they are, it's going to be difficult to find that. You got a lot of places, got a lot of people that are going to be needed, so it's got to be a baseline. What is the other support? You got to almost create some kind of safety net for the community in a way, and I don't know, as a thing. And so people, I mean, this may be unicorn urine or something.
It's
well, if we're gonna start from scratch, it's just the dream list right now, right? I mean, you're building the foundation. Why don't put everything you want on top?
Even if these community centers turn into a bunch of people on drugs hanging out playing pool,
who cares?
I'm saying it's better than just walking around the street, falling down, and getting arrested and dragged. You know what I'm saying? Like it's we got to start thinking about it in those terms. I mean,
and then how about asking these people, like, what do you? I mean, do you want to get off drugs? Like, a lot of people they're just trying to not get sick, and they don't understand the path, and they don't have access to the resource, so they just keep doing what they know, and that's problematic.
You know what the response would be? That there's, it sounds like an invitation to cause a homeless problem, doesn't it?
No, I don't think that's.
Well, there is a correlation between homelessness and mental health issues and things like that go untreated. But I think given people, that's a tough one, because you wonder if you put folks all together like that, what kind of shenanigans are going to take place?
There will always be shenanigans. I mean, that's just how it is. But at the end of the day, the real root of the problem is, and we've talked about this before, that this country, for whatever reason, does not take mental health seriously. And until that happens, none of this shit matters. We had state-run hospitals, and it wasn't good. I don't think anybody thought it was good, but now we have nothing. And these people that have access to nothing end up going to jail. And that's why we see these exploding jail populations. And there's a way to prevent this, but we're just not interested, apparently.
There's a history of this, Jim, and we can close with this because I know we're past our booked time here. The history goes like this, that there was a time in the United States where the law, states criminalized the people that were drug addicts. Like, they'd arrest you with a drug, and they would charge you with a crime, which is being a drug addict or, addicted to drugs. So the reason why this comes up is because when you search for the jurisprudence on cruel and unusual punishment, these are the types of cases that come up. But that's a history there, I mean, and we, at least now we've evolved to understand that it's, I mean, I don't know, it's still being criminalized, right? I mean, people are possessing illegal substances.
It's called something different.
Okay, but it's, instead of calling it a drug addict, they don't call them that. They just arrest them for possessing the drug that they're using, whether they're an addict or not.
Yeah, or doing things, or just
they treat them like an addict.
Living like, I mean, charging them with things like loitering in a no narcotics area, and just they find ways.
They're abusers. Abusers is kind of the word that the controlled substances actually. They're abusers.
Well, it's weird because some of the illegal possession, charges can be possession. And then there's the use. Use is always like a lesser of some kind. Yeah. But possession in most of the controlled substances, except for cannabis, originally, were all felonies, Possession of cocaine, felony.
Yeah.
It's been a big windfall. A lot of people injured and not a lot of success for one could point to for the war on drugs team, right? What are they doing?
It's still totally in operation. It's plugging right along, and I don't understand it. I think people are starting to see it. I mean, you hear more people talking about the perspective of drug addiction really being a public health issue as opposed to a public safety issue. But I don't think people are ready to open that box yet. And until we do, we can't really truly address the problem, because the police are ill-equipped to do this. The prosecutors are ill-equipped, and so are the judges. And we need to get the folks that actually know how to handle the problem involved. And that's what we just have completely turned away from for whatever reason.
Atticus Finch said, "You don't always win, but sometimes you do." And sometimes we do big. Celebrate small victories.
That's right. All right, so everybody had enough. Jamie, and Amanda, you're next. Any final words? You're done? Just what can we expect for next week's show in terms of 3D printing?
Harmonica.
All right.
Maybe a trumpet.
What are you going to print, Jamie?
I'm currently printing kind of a non-traditional style ukulele that was designed by an engineer to be able to have pieces that are normal in terms of not having to make them really super extra dense in order to handle the stress of the strings and stuff like that. Just designed to come together at certain angles and things like that to be able to make a playable ukulele. And this one can have like a little pickup installed in it. So that's what I'm trying to do now. I just printed this traditional kind of.
That's cool.
board.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
Amanda, Jamie, any final words? Are we gonna?
No, I'm glad that we ragged on those. I was going to say pieces of shit, but I don't know what if that's appropriate or not. Who really compromised a lot of people's lives because they decided not to follow by the rules, or even just the scientific method at least.
Shameful.
Yeah.
Amanda, Jeff.
Well, it was a good show, and my final thought is that I'm looking forward to the final copy of the interview today, the Cana Conversations.
Yeah.
And Steve's is out there too, so I'll be doing some sharing.
All right. Awesome. Jeff, any final comments?
Always test for zero.
Always test for zero. I like that. And Jimmy, you can have the final say, I guess.
I ain't got shit.
All right, good. That's all that needs to be said. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week. Be safe.
Bye, you guys.
So long, brother.
Take care, guys.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
When you're charged with a crime, you need a real attorney. And here's just a few reasons why. The police, the courts, the labs, the drug tests, probation, the judges, the jails, the prisons, and the entire system is just one big machine. They have one objective: take your freedom, take your possessions, take your money, take your children, control your life, and destroy your future. You only get one chance to hire the right attorney. One that will stay in your corner. One that will fight for your rights. One that will fight for your freedom. Choose an attorney that's experienced in fighting the justice machine. Attorney Michael Komorn. Knockout victories one case at a time. Komorn Law. Google it. komornlaw.com.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
Hi, I'm attorney Michael Komorn of Komorn Law PLC, and you are watching Planet Green Trees.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
Before you plea, call me, attorney Michael Komorn.
An important and historical farm crop in American agriculture is returned after having been classified as a controlled substance and illegal. On December 20th, 2018, the President signed the Farm Bill, also known as the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018, into law. The signing of the act was great news for the hemp industry, which amended the definition of marijuana in the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Hemp is now defined as the plant, Cannabis sativa L, and any part of the plant, growing or not, with less than 0.3% THC concentration on a dry basis. The plant itself is no longer a controlled substance. Hemp is one of the most versatile plants on earth. From clothing, fiber, paper, building materials, hempcrete, biofuels, CBD, and medical uses, it has been a part of America's industry for over 200 years. Even the United States Constitution was drafted on hemp paper. The time is now. If you're thinking of getting in the farming or processing of hemp, contact our global experts, legal, and consultation teams to make sure that you're on the right road when you venture into the new hemp industrial revolution. Michigan Hemp Industries has been a leader and advocate for the return of the hemp industry, so come be a part of the new revolution in agriculture in Michigan.
I am Earl from G3 Cannabis Therapy Network, and you are watching Planet Green Trees, the original and #1 podcast in Michigan for all things cannabis and legal news.